Everyone, this is Pramod Nair of the Department of English, the University of Hyderabad. In preceding sessions, we have looked at posthumanism in its various forms and in its various genealogies, including animal studies, cognition studies. We have looked at feminist epistemologies and how disciplines and domains such as disability studies have contributed to posthumanist thought. We have also acknowledged that posthumanism's principal expression, shall we say, or embodiment has been in the realm of popular culture through the representations of cyborgs, of the human-machine hybrids, of human plant and modified human hybrids, chimeras, and such a large variety of interspecies identities, interspecies bodies, and interspecies structures. So this could mean, for instance, the implants in your bodies or your minds of computer chips, the kind of prosthetic devices people have to wear for survival and for normalized, shall we say, functioning of the human body. But we have also mentioned several times the possibilities that exist of enhancing the human form and the possibility, particularly in transhumanism, of transcending the limitations imposed by the fact of we possessing a body. That because humans have a body, those bodies are injurable. Those bodies have limits. So this could be about, say, intelligence. It could be about, say, immunity to disease or the lack of it. And the fact that we can be broken, beaten, or injured. That we will grow old, our bones, our teeth, our senses will begin to erode. Our chemical processes will be modified over a period of time, and we will require, say, for instance, supplements or more exercises or other modes of assistance to keep ourselves going. Which means to say that the human body is where a considerable amount of post-human thinking has focused on. And hence the interest also in, say, the biology of cyborgs and the biology of cyborgization as humans more and more to lesser or greater degrees and in kind incorporate machines into our lives, into our bodies, into our thinking, into our very consciousness in some cases. Our session today is on post-human biology. And let's begin with one of the foundational assumptions of posthumanism, that the body is more and more interfaced with machines. That human bodies are embedded in a distributed system or network. Our standard awareness or sense of the post-human comes, as I have mentioned before, images of RoboCop or Terminator and several such films from the 80s onwards, which showed human bodies that are part human, part machine. We now have artificial bodies, of course, where the converse of it has come true. So it's no longer human bodies that interface with machines, but machines and artificial intelligences that take the form of robots, humanoid beings, and artificial beings. So the nature of the form, or to be more accurate, the nature of the human form is a matter of considerable concern to people in posthumanism and to people who despair of posthumanism. So we have 4 or 5 points that are central, and I just mentioned one of them, that the human body is seen as embedded in a network. It's not an autonomous thing. It's not a self-contained, hermetically sealed structure, but it's a body networked with machines through and through. Posthuman biology emphasizes that this network could be with machines and other life forms, which means to say that human bodies are autonomous because it tries to work on its own and maintain its equilibrium, and it seeks to exercise a fair amount of control over ourselves, over our functions, our physiologies and our anatomy. But humans are organisms embedded in any kind of environments, different kinds of environments. So our bodies, our lives are autonomous in the sense of physiological or cognitive or consciousness processes, because it possesses a capacity to control itself. This is, if you recall what we have said when we are talking about cybernetics, that the body manages to take in information and regulate itself from within. Even the nervous system is an autonomous dynamic system, but it absorbs information from the environment and then it puts itself, as in the information, through a process within its own internal feedback loops. Which means to say that what we call our nervous system works through the arrival of, through the assimilation of external stimuli and subsequent internal activities. So it's a twofold, a two-step process. Information comes in and this information is subject to processing by our internal networks, our internal mechanisms, and you cannot separate the two. So it's not enough to say, oh, we are autonomous. We are autonomous after being part of a network, after being embedded in a network, and from which and through which we have a feedback loop. So yes, the consciousness is mine. I mean, my consciousness is not just taken from here and there. It is taken from here and there and then processed internally. And that is the feedback mechanism, that the body takes in external stimuli, puts it through its own internal processes, and then generates what we understand as consciousness. So this is important to understand, that cognition or consciousness, as we discussed in the last session, is not something that happens in abstraction. It occurs because we have embodied beings, and in a context which involves this embodiment. Remember what we said, that consciousness is both embedded and embodied. That consciousness emerges out of our body's interactions with the world and the processing of that information within our internal structures, our neural network, our central peripheral nervous system, our brains, whatever you want to think about. I mean, if you want to break it up. But the crucial point is consciousness is embodied. So in posthuman biology, this becomes a major step, that we have to think of our biological processes, including our consciousness and our cognitive processes, as both embodied and embedded. Embodied because we have a flesh and blood body, it has its own neural network, it has its muscles, it is various things. And out of those interactions, body's interactions with the world and our body's internal processes also working as some kind of network inside us, that's how consciousness emerges. So the larger point is that what we think of as subjectivity, which is our sense of ourselves, our awareness of ourselves, is more and more a techno-subjectivity. For posthuman biology or posthumanist views of biology, since the body is networked, interfaced, if you want to use another word, with machines and systems, including data of various kinds or electronic information gathering systems, our subjectivity is techno-subjectivity. It's not subjectivity in isolation, It's not subjectivity as in human plus a machine. It's human with a machine. We are plugged in. The machine is plugged into us. We are plugged into the machine. So human subjectivity is inevitably a techno-subjectivity because the body is embedded in and interfaced with machines and systems of all kinds. Like I said, it could be data systems. It could be, for example, the biometric system through which our data, health data, is recorded, distributed to, say, health service providers or insurance providers or your local pharmacy. It could be electronic surveillance, which is, of course, now a part of our lives. It could be all the databases into which our bodies are constantly being fed in as mathematized data. So our sense of who we are, our subjectivity is actually techno-subjectivity. And you no longer can think of subjectivity as just a sense of ourselves coming from who we are as bodies, as brains, as minds, and whatnot. It's a huge step. It's a perhaps disconcerting and unsettling step. But this is an important development. Then, having said that we are both embodied and embedded, we recognize in post-humanist views of biology that the human is a part of a larger system. And the human shares borders, functions, form with these other systems. Remember, stimuli or information comes in from the outside, the brain processes it, and consciousness emerges. So the human interfaces with the world and shares borders with it, which means to say there is no such thing as a self-contained human body. So let's move now from questions of machines and technology to something else. We do know, and we have mentioned this before, and it's now more or less commonplace knowledge, that we survive because various other life forms help the human body to survive. We know that we have certain kinds of bacteria in our stomachs that help us to digest our food. That these life forms are crucial to our functions, and hence people who have a shortfall in the bacterial presence have to take probiotics and things like that, right? So, are you an independent life form? Are you just what your body is? No, your body is made up of several other life forms. Let me complicate this a little more. What we think of as my DNA or your DNA is not yours or mine. Our genetic materials, our genetic data comes from a complete family genealogy, right? The DNA comes down to us from our ancestors. So tell me, how is my DNA exclusively mine? It's not. It's not, because my DNA comes to me because of my ancestry. It's based on community, it's based on location, it's based on ethnicity. DNA profiles are actually collective profiles in which you are one speck. You are one dot. And this is important because we recognize then that what we are as a human is actually one step in an evolutionary process. For example, as evolutionary biology will tell you, how does our present posture of the erect human being emerge? How does Homo sapiens emerge? We move up gradually on an evolutionary scale, and we have reached this level. Which means to say, our biological form and function have both emerged over millennia of human evolution. Now tell me, do you think your biology is exclusively yours? No, because it has come down to us from ancestors of different generations, of people who have lived across millennia, long dead and gone. Our general human interest in ancestry stems from this. Our question to ourselves is, who are we? Where do we come from? Paleontologists, paleobotanists, and people working with deep time and deep histories are very interested in ancestry, because we now have come to recognize that our biological structures, it could be how the human eye evolved, how our brains have evolved, how our posture has evolved. Any of these have evolved over millennia in terms of the first humans to the present. So think about it. Our biology is not our own. Our DNA is also not our own. And what you think are unique to us, our eyesight, the way our eye has become, the way our olfactory or auditory systems have become. These are not accidents. These have occurred over a long period of time. Some people might think of it as accidental. Darwinism and neo-Darwinism goes hammer and tongs at these ones. But for now, we will not get into that particular debate. What's important to recognize is biological features, cognitive features, physiological features are things that have come to us, are traits that came to us from millennia. They could have also come by mixtures of genetic material. They have. There is no such thing as a pure human race. All races have been mixed and merged and things like that. Now the question therefore is, since our biology, and take a simple example, our biology is co-evolution. The mitochondria in our cells, as biologists now tell us, they were originally bacteria. As evolution proceeded, these bacteria got absorbed into the cell. They became what are called powerhouses of the cell, as biology lessons will tell you. And it became a part of the human cellular structure. They were originally bacteria. Now think about this. If you look at your biology lessons, the prokaryote, eukaryote and things like that, you will discover how we move from single-celled organisms to multicellular organisms to where we are now. In the process, some of this material came from here and there. We absorbed material, we grew with it. Now, do we know how we will evolve in future? Do we know whether this bodily structure, which has co-evolved with other life forms, including bacteria, will remain the same? How will it evolve? Elsewhere, I have proposed that we need to accept something called a species cosmopolitanism, that we will co-evolve with other creatures as we have always evolved. Humanity has absorbed material from all sorts of things. We continue to live on Earth thanks to the bacteria in our stomachs, thanks to the plants outside, thanks to the various animal and bird species that constitute our environment. As we know, we require plants, we require the soil, we require the earthworms and other creatures of the soil, because they keep the planet in a working condition, and humans require that working condition in order to survive, in order to live. So we've co-evolved. We are a species that exhibits what I refer to as a species cosmopolitanism. Now, we know that the post-human view privileges informational pattern, and that everything about our bodies consists of information. And whatever we think of as the body is something that is a conglomerate of information networks, and we need to see it as seamlessly articulated with other organisms, with other creatures. So, as the posthumanist critic Francesca Ferrando asks, what is human if there is no human without bacteria, viruses, and so on? What is human if there is no human without bacteria, viruses, and so on? Humans, like I just said a couple of minutes ago, share an ancestral kinship with several forms of life. We are not original. We are not solitary. We are not unitary. We are not monocultural. We are heterocultural. Human DNA itself has evolved over millennia, right? And the DNA is not just a set of data. It's not just a code. The code requires a body in which it will appear. Remember, I used the term manifest in the previous sessions. It requires a body in which the genetic features, the genetic data can appear in a certain form. Our biology, therefore, is what the biologists refer to as a congeries of the human and the non-human, including but not limited to the microbes, the viruses. So, what we call the human is a mixture of the human and the non-human. Please, let's get this right. What we think of as the living organism called the human is actually a mixture of the human and the non-human. It is also a mixture of the living and the non-living. Because after all, the chemicals that constitute our body are not live. They're chemicals, including the things that make up your bones, calcium, your teeth, right? These are chemicals, which is to say that our animated life, our animation hinges upon the inanimate. If you want irony in biology, here it is. What we think of as the anima of our lives, the vital force of our lives, hinges on chemicals which are non-living. So the living, the biological, both of them depend on the non-human and the non-living. It is a sum total of this. Even our emotions come from that. As we know, our emotions come from, of course, our hardwiring, the neurological structure of the human brain. But the triggers for these responses come from elsewhere. Remember what we said about consciousness and cognition. Our sentimental responses come from the environment, but they also come from our biological hardwiring and the social training we receive, which is what we refer to as emotional intelligence. So we learn, for example, to put on a certain kind of expression when we are attending, say, a ceremony of marriage or death, an appropriate expression. How do we know? How do we learn to do this? We learn to do this because social training enables us to develop what is called emotional intelligence. It's not automatic. Yes, it depends upon the way we are hardwired. Yes, but that is not the only explanation. Increasingly, we'll see that, and we have seen biologists, neurologists, as well as philosophers arguing for the plasticity of the brain, that the brain can absorb changes to itself, find bypasses, that what is within us as a brain can respond to stimuli, modify itself. People like Catherine Malabou and several others have talked about it, philosophically speaking. And of course, the point I mentioned last time about mirror neurons, the work of Christian Kaiser and others, that our brains fire mirror neurons upon seeing somebody else do certain things. And that's how we develop both mimicry and the ability to learn by observation, right? So empathy, sentiment, learning are all indications of our brain modifying itself through the arrival of stimulus from outside. So post-human biology clearly is a far more complicated thing than we have given it credit for, because on the one hand we say there is the genetic material, but on the other we say we are also social creatures. We cannot say that our personalities, who we are, depends only on one or the other. It depends on both. So for posthumanists, biology, as in human biology, is a very complicated, very layered subject of analysis, that who we are as in human subjectively is actually a mishmash, a congeries of our biological structure, by which I mean the DNA, the flesh and bones thing, our neural processes, but also larger environments, which include things like the diet we get, the stimuli from outside, and of course the training we receive in terms of education. So posthuman biology is, or posthumous approaches to biology is a very complicated domain, but it's also one of the most fascinating because that's where major challenges of the philosophical, ethical variety have come up, particularly to do with questions of enhancing the human body and the moral enhancements of humans.